Welcome back for our next plenary session. I hope you enjoyed the workshops that you attended. Today we focused on Israel, combating anti-Semitism, racial equality, criminal justice reform, and civil rights. The buzz was fabulous, and I want to thank our amazing speakers. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker of this session, the esteemed Israeli ambassador to the United States and the United Nations, Gilad Erdan. The last person to hold those two positions concurrently was the diplomat and politician Abba Eban in the 50s. The ambassador has had a prestigious career in Israeli government as a member of Knesset since 2003, the Minister of Environmental Protection, Minister of Communications, Minister of the Interior, Minister of Internal Security, and Minister of Strategic Affairs and Information. It is my honor to welcome the Ambassador Erdan to address the conference.
Shalom, everyone. Thank you for that warm introduction. It is great to be here with all of you. I'd also like to thank Michael Fromm, Deborah Cohen, and Harold again, the co-chairs of the JCPA 2021 conference, Melania Roth-Gorelik, Chaya Luftig, and the entire JCPA board. Israel deeply values all of JCPA's work in educating, coordinating, and mobilizing the American Jewish community on key issues such as combating hate, defending Israel, and sharing our Jewish values of justice, tolerance, and equality with the world. After 17 years in Israel's Knesset and over a decade as a minister, I decided to accept Prime Minister Netanyahu's offer to take a hiatus from politics and become Israel's ambassador to the United States and the United Nations. And while I was hesitant at first, I realized that I could not pass up the opportunity to pursue two of my passions. In my dual role, I am able to continue to combat the lies and defend Israel on the world stage, and to share Israel's incredible creative and innovative spirit with the world. The key to succeeding in both of these important tasks is fostering the close relationship between Israel and its most valued ally, the United States. This is why one of my top priorities as ambassador is to maintain and deepen further the bipartisan support for Israel. Almost every day I speak with members of Congress from both sides of the aisle, and with administration officials, of course. We discuss exciting ideas for expanding the already extensive cooperation between our countries. For example, on climate change, an issue that is very important to the administration, to Israel, and to me personally. Israel is leading the way in addressing environmental challenges such as clean energy, water scarcity, and food insecurity. I have already discussed new collaborations in these fields with Special Climate Envoy Kerry, and last week President Biden hosted a Leaders Summit on climate change, and Prime Minister Netanyahu was one of the world leaders invited to speak. I believe that another key component of maintaining and strengthening the bipartisan support for Israel is building ties between Israelis and all of the different communities in the United States. First and foremost, it is very important to expand the connection between Israel and all parts of American Jewry, which is the foundation of the US-Israel alliance. I see members of all Jewish communities as my brothers and sisters. I also think it is crucial to build strong ties with other parts of American society. That is why, during Black History Month, I took my first official trip as ambassador to South Carolina and Alabama to learn more about the issues facing the African American community and about their incredible contribution to the American story. I was accompanied by key African American leaders who shared with me their personal stories and insights about the community and about racial equity. We visited plantations, walked the Civil Rights Trail, and crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. it was extremely, extremely inspiring. I was so moved by Wanda Battle, a volunteer tour leader at Martin Luther King's church in Montgomery, that I invited her to sing the Hatikvah at our recent Yom HaAtzmaut event. I also visited Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, where in 2015 a white supremacist barbarically murdered 9 people in their place of worship. It was an important reminder of how much work we still have left to do to eliminate racism. I was moved to hear how the Mother Emanuel congregation reached out and offered their support to the Jewish community in Pittsburgh after the shooting at the Tree of Life synagogue. And while I was moved, I wasn't surprised. Perhaps my biggest takeaway from that experience is the many similarities that exist between the Jewish and African American communities and our shared commitment to the holy struggle against all forms of hate. This fight is also one of my top priorities as ambassador. As the grandson of Holocaust survivors, 3 of whom survived the horrors of Auschwitz, I am committed to countering hate, racism, and anti-Semitism in all its forms, including its modern manifestation, delegitimizing the State of Israel. I want to thank JCPA for all of its important efforts in countering these attempts and fighting against BDS. In order to combat anti-Semitism at the UN, I am promoting 2 important initiatives. The first is to pass a UN General Assembly resolution that effectively combats the disgusting phenomenon of Holocaust denial. And the second is working with Secretary General Guterres and other UN officials to promote the adoption of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism as the official definition for all UN bodies. 30 countries, as well as many important institutions and organizations like JCPA, have already adopted the definition. But I will not be satisfied until all countries take up this definition and begin to truly tackle anti-Semitism. Friends, another of my top priorities is dealing with Iran, the world's most dangerous regime. Iran's leaders declared their intentions to annihilate the world's only Jewish state as they continue to develop their nuclear program and send their terrorist proxies to threaten Israel's borders and destabilize the Middle East. While we share the same goal as the new administration to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear threshold state, and we are holding open and frank conversations on the matter, we still don't see eye to eye on the right approach to reach that goal. Israel believes that allowing Iran to return to the old 2015 Iran deal, even as a first step towards a longer and stronger agreement, as they call it, would be a serious mistake. Why would Iran agree to negotiate a deal that is worse for it once it is back in the old agreement? According to the fundamentally flawed deal, almost all restrictions on Iran will expire in a decade, and its breakout time to a bomb will be weeks, as President Obama himself said after the agreement was signed. Let me be clear. While Israel opposes returning to the 2015 deal, we support a diplomatic solution. If a deal was devised that permanently blocks Iran from becoming a nuclear threshold state and doesn't just kick the can down the road, we would be the first ones to knock on every door to rally support for it. Israel will never allow the most dangerous regime in the world to acquire the most dangerous weapon in the world. Friends, while Iran is the source of much instability and danger in our region, ironically, it has also played a role in promoting peace in the Middle East. the dangerous and radical activities of the extremist ayatollahs that try to undermine the security of the Middle East have helped unite the moderate states in the region. The Abraham Accords, the peace between Israel and the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan have truly transformed our region, and my goal is to widen this circle of peace even further. Perhaps the most inspiring aspect of this warm peace is how the peoples of the region have embraced the agreement's message of coexistence and religious tolerance. They have begun to learn each other's languages and to cooperate in businesses, culture, academia, and many, many more. I am already working with my colleagues at the UN and in Washington to promote issues that are so important to us, such as overcoming the water scarcity challenge, providing clean energy, as well as gender equality, innovation, and fighting online radicalization. Just last week, I was at the UAE Embassy in Washington for a special tree planting event for Earth Day, and I held an event with the Moroccan ambassador to the UN on ending food insecurity. I hope that others, especially the Palestinians, will recognize the incredible opportunities that this new reality in the Middle East presents them, and more importantly, their children. If after 63 years Sudan was able to end its boycott of Israel, the Palestinians should at least be able to begin discussing peace with us. Friends, we just celebrated Israel's 73rd Independence Day. In just 73 years, Israel has made incredible contributions to the world, in science and technology, as well as security and art. Peace is spreading in the Middle East, and while we still face threats, Israel is strong. Our alliance with the United States is strong, and I will continue to work to make sure that even if there are disagreements, they will not turn into a crisis. On behalf of the State of Israel, I want to thank again JCPA for all of your important work. I look forward to working with you to promote our shared goals in the future. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Ambassador, for speaking at JCPA 2021 today. We are so excited about our next panel discussion entitled Athletes Against Antisemitism. This panel is modeled after a similar discussion that took place in Pittsburgh that we thought would be an important conversation for our network. In today's world, celebrities have great influence. We have witnessed what happens when someone makes an anti-Semitic remark. It reverberates throughout the Jewish community, creating hurt and fear. Today, we will learn about an effort to combat hate and build back unity between the Black and Jewish communities.
My name is Laura Cherner, and I'm the Director of Community Relations at the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. I'm honored to introduce the next panel discussion, highlighting the very important initiative, Athletes Against Antisemitism. Last year, when a few high-profile people were sharing anti-Semitic views and language, Pittsburgh Steelers Zach Banner was one of the first to stand up and call it out. Too often, the Jewish community is used to being our own advocate against anti-Semitism when we see it. It was incredibly moving when he spoke up without hesitation and recalled his emotion after the shooting at the Tree of Life building in Pittsburgh on October 27, 2018. It was a reminder that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. Conversations like the one that you are about to hear are so important because they exemplify what it means to use one's platform for good and educate those about the dangers of anti-Semitism. Conversations like these help strengthen important alliances between communities with the common goal of standing up against hate. I am proud of Pittsburgh not only because we are the city of champions on the field, but because of the allyship built off of the field. It is a place where we work together and stand up for one another. I am so grateful and honored to share the pride of Pittsburgh with you this evening.
Greetings. I'm Lauren Apter Barron's father. I'm director of the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. where we connect the horrors of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism with injustices of today. And we do that through education, and a lot of that is a program like this, where we're engaging with the community. Zach Banner, whom you'll meet shortly, brings us together today. But this event really is several years in the making, and for me, it is a dream come true. The thought leader Eric Ward, who was a fellow at the Southern Poverty Law Center and is head of the Western State Center in Portland. I'm sure he's known to many people who are interacting with this program now. He was asked if anti-Semitism is at the core of white nationalism. He responded, anti-Semitism is the core of white nationalism. So we're coming together now to merge separate conversations about racism and anti-Semitism. And this program is really a cause for celebration. Some would call it a miracle. I believe with all of my heart that conversations like these pave the way to a better world. And I want to thank Zach Banner and I want to thank the JCPA for inviting us to continue this conversation that we started in February. Our panelists today are Zach Banner. Zach Banner is a USC All-American and current Pittsburgh Steelers offensive tackle. Go Steelers. As his football career accelerated, he maintained his focus on giving back to the community. When he was drafted, he started the B3 Foundation, and I want to thank the B3 Foundation and Sarah there for her role in making this happen today. So we'll hear more about this work in our conversation. We're also joined by Alicia Clark, an American-Israeli professional basketball player. She currently plays for the Washington Mystics of the WNBA. Alicia is a two-time WNBA champion, two-time all-defensive team selection, and has won league championships in Israel, Poland, and France. Finally, we are joined by Yael Averbush West. Yael is the current executive director of the National Women's Soccer League Players Association, a professional soccer player. She last played as a defendant for Seattle Reign FC in the National Women's Soccer League. What a slate of incredible athletes. All of you are leaders in social justice advocacy, and I am honored to spend this time with you. So thank you so much. To start us off, I want to invite Zach Banner to say a few words about what motivated him to start this movement and just tell us a little bit more about where you're coming from, Zach.
Yeah, guys, thanks for joining us today. Want to give a shout out to everyone who made this happen and all our panelists and everything. It's really just a natural reflection of not only the kind of person that I want to be, but my heart. I have a passion for not only education, that's what B3, my foundation, focuses on, but also coming together, bringing together, and that's part of our slogan and part of our mission statement, because if it wasn't for amazing people who are not only Jew or who are not only Black, who are not only brown, or not only white, like if we're not all teaming up together, then just force on force and nothing else happens. And that's kind of, that's a reflection of not only our history as a country, but a history as a planet and a human race, is that when we come together, we're better together, plain and simple. So when you're talking about things like racism, hate, anti-Semitism, it's all in the same bunch. And if we really get down to it, it's the same groups who are hating against all of us and who are trying to oppress all of us in certain and special and different ways. And when I say special, I want to make sure we're talking about something particular, something, precise and different things. And systemic racism and just racism overall and hate is obvious, but sometimes, it's hidden underneath these sheets and layers of history and laws and, legislation. And it's one of those things that we have to dig deep, we have to identify, and we can't be upset when we do identify those things. We can't be upset with each other, and we can't be upset with others.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that this is a theme that will run through our conversation. And so I want to turn it over to you, Alicia. Can you tell us about what inspires your activism? And I invite all of you to get as personal as you're willing to in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be having this conversation again with you all. For me, but what I think motivates me most was honestly, this past summer in the WNBA, we did a lot of social justice work for Black women, for Black people in this country about voting rights, really educating and understanding the laws that are in place, how they affect, each and every one of us at just our core level. And for me, I've always, similar to what Zach was saying, just about your heart. For me, I've always stuck up for others. I've always, wanted to do right by other people. I always wanted to treat people with respect and, allow people to be who they are without judgment. And that's something that was instilled in me, from my parents. And so I think as I've gotten older, and, just the platform that I have as a professional athlete, understanding that I can help make change. And that one of the pretty cool things from this past summer was that as an entire league, we helped raise awareness about a very important sentencing in Georgia, and to be able to educate, not only ourselves about, who's running, the laws that are there, understanding our platform, our power in numbers. We played a very small part, but a crucial part in helping flip a Senate seat in an entire state. And that for me was something that I was like, wow, my platform really can make a difference. And so I think as I continue to grow in this area of my activism is, it's something that I can just continue to look upon to understand if I can help one or two people be better, if I can help one or two people enrich their lives just a little bit more, then I'm doing my job here while I'm here. And so that's something that's always been a passion of mine.
It's so amazing because you reach many, many more people, right? I mean, you have such a platform, and that you're using it in this way. It's really a game changer. Really, it's incredible. So yeah, Elle, I want to hear from you too. Can you tell us about yourself a bit and what inspires your activism?
Yeah, so I think that like many, especially white people, I think this past year really opened my eyes to a lot of my own privilege and my own blind spots. I'm as a Jewish woman, I'm used to in some way being a minority and having to explain to people, or standing out, being the only woman in a male-dominated environment, or being the only one not to go to church on a holiday when I'm with a soccer team. I'm used to the idea of having to explain to people, or visibly, not fitting in with the norm. But in being married to a Black man and having recently, now we have a half Black, half white Jewish daughter. In this past year, I would say I found myself many times ashamed of how much I didn't understand my husband's life and my husband's struggles. And the same thing with the Black women who I've been on teams with for years and years. And I would do anything for these women. They're my great dear friends. I would do anything for my family members. And even within my own family, I didn't understand the daily struggles that people have been facing for, every day of their lives. And so for me, in that realization, I really took it upon myself to try to, in any way I could, amplify the voices of other people. And whether it's me talking about Judaism and anti-Semitism, or allowing the Black Women's Players Collective, which very much has taken a lot of inspiration for the work of the WNBA players, and doing anything I can to listen to them and to make sure other people can hear them, because I realize now how little I know. And I think that's really indicative of how little a lot of people, especially in our country, know about the daily struggles of people who are different than them.
That resonates so deeply with me, because I had a similar awakening, even though this is work that we've done at the Holocaust Center for a long time. And I've been involved in working in all kinds of different communities for years. But I had the same realization that you just described, that I still didn't quite get it, as much as I cared about it. And so, I mean, for everybody who's watching, this is an ongoing process of learning. We're learning every day about each other and learning how to show up for each other, and just very, very close to my own experience. So that's really important. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to hear from all of you about what you're really fired up about now. Where are you directing your activism now? I'll go to Zach first.
Yeah, I think the direction that not only myself, B3, and the people around me and my team, I think the direction is Alicia's shirt says it right on, is creating empathy, right? And Elle, to just hear you passionately talk about how you have teammates who you put your life on the line for, and you stick your neck out there, and you talk about your beautiful, mixed race child, and, having empathy from your husband, and creating these things. I think those are the type of environments that we have to create, whether it's from a community aspect, speaking out, doing things like this, having conversations about it, but also just socially, like making it like, and I know we talked about it a little bit, it's natural in our hearts, but just creating those environments, communities that are just flourishing, through different races, through different cultures, through different backgrounds. Just having this panel right now with two fair-skinned, white-skinned allies, and not only you, Doc, but L2 at the same time, like there's going to be things that your kid is going to have to deal with for being biracial and being in a room. And that's something that Alicia and I have dealt with our entire lives, and will continue to have to deal with our lives, and to continue to have to deal with our kids. I mean, you guys, you specifically made a family with someone from the different background of you. And unfortunately, there are people who frown upon that in our world, in our society, and they'll try to stop that from happening. As just heartless and soulless as that sounds, it's natural. And it's natural for communities to build these walls and these barriers around themselves and not want to help others, or to have excuse or social excuses for not helping and not getting involved, or bringing in who's right and who's left, and not, bringing in these politics versus what is right and what is wrong. And I think the biggest direction in terms of not only the community work, but the work that we're doing, and just making life like naturally wholesome and with a rainbow effect across our society, I just feel like it's just a natural, steady course that we're all going.
I hope that's true. I mean, I definitely want to be on that course. So, so Alicia, tell us about what you're involved with now.
Yeah, so for me, especially going into this season, this season I'm out with injury, so I think I'm in a unique spot to where I can continue being involved and continue the work that we started last season, and just really being more involved. This season, being off the court, having more time to be places and to show up, and to kind of piggyback off what Zach said, just about trying to help educate people, and in a sense where they can have empathy towards people that are different. And that for me has always been like that, the driving force behind why I wanted to even be involved and even start speaking up. I did it in my private life, and wanting people, that's something for me. I want people to feel like they matter. I want people to feel like, they have a purpose, that it's okay. It's good to be different. I want them to feel confident in that. And so I think, this just kind of falls in line. And so even, battling anti-Semitism is just, for me, I played in Israel for 5 years. I have my citizenship there. I was able to play with the Israeli women's national team. And just to be able to experience anti-Semitism from, almost a naive standpoint, because, you hear about it and you don't really know. And sitting in meetings and stuff before we would go play teams in other countries, just the extent of, security measures and information that we had to go through. That was the first time that I was faced with that. And I was like, whoa, and so for me, this is falling right in line, battling, helping raise awareness, but like just raising awareness of anti-Semitism, about racism and inequality in the US, and just continuing to be a voice and a light in that lane, and continue to give truth and give facts, and use my platform in ways that I can, wherever I can, to help just make it a little bit better.
Yeah. So Elle, we heard a little bit about what's on your mind, and I'm thinking of your daughter and how beautiful, and how I want her to live in the kind of world that we're describing, this world that we want to create. Tell us about what you're involved with now.
Yeah, a lot of when Alicia talks about awareness, I think a lot of what I have found my role to be is to create safe spaces for conversations. And it's something I've experienced myself. Is there's one thing is that I know I can, within my family, I can always ask questions. And my husband and I, from the start, there's a lot of difficult questions that I've had to ask. And I also understand that it's not only his role to educate me or educate all white people. And similarly, it's not my job as a Jewish woman to educate everyone about Judaism. But I think there has to be an exchange of a safe place to ask questions and a safe place for a group of people to talk about struggles and talk about their fears without there always being something to come back at, well, you should act like this, or you shouldn't have done this. And I found that in my own life, that's something I do a lot. I have this conversation with my husband all the time. Well, people might not know that our daughter is Jewish. So what if she has to hear anti-Semitic things? Or, what if she ends up being a lighter skinned woman and has to hear people saying racist things and they don't know? So how will we teach her to navigate that? And similarly, within the National Women's Soccer League, having conversations, we had a really pivotal phone call with all the players in the league around this time last year, surrounding some of the conversation about how to handle the national anthem and allowing players to protest. And for the first time, I think in a bigger group, there was a platform for the Black women in our league to tell us how they've felt their entire lives in their soccer experience, which is, soccer is a very, very white, affluent sport in the US. Nowhere else in the world, but in the US, there's a very strong majority of white women playing in the league. And so to hear from our teammates, so for me, to be able to open doors for more of those conversations, I think is really valuable, whether it's just a one-on-one type conversation or something within the National Women's Soccer League or something even more public. Conversation like this, I think, is so important, where people can speak honestly and openly and ask these questions.
Yeah, and I think about it also as a safe enough space where you can say the wrong thing. But I mean, it's okay. We're all learning, right? We don't have to be perfectly articulate about all of this, but we have to show up and we have to be ready to listen to people. And,
And Doc, just to
please.
piggyback off of I really do agree with creating those safe space, but I also want us to, as professional athletes, to make it safe and normal for others in our locker rooms to step up as well. Let's just get this loud and clear. The WNBA kicks all our asses when it comes to speaking out and fighting against hate. It's normal, but that's also because it's, and the same thing in other women's sports, women's soccer, and all those other things. But it's also because if you look at it, it's also because they have to deal with playing sports and growing up to become dominant in their sport and professional athletes against a misogynistic country, so it's already kind of embedded, fighting for to up the female athletic platform. But it's up to us, up to me, for guys in our locker room, not to only feel empathy towards all these things that we're talking about, and they do. And we talk about it amongst our peers, but because, the history of our sport, especially in football, it's probably the NFL has been slower and the slowest out of all the leagues to be able to bring up social conflicts and social injustices and social change. But that's because it's an 80 to 90% dominant Black and brown league. And we finally, unfortunately, after the whole George Floyd thing last year and during the quarantine and having a lot of time to be able to meet safely on these Zooms with each other, to build that confidence for, not only just Blacks and browns to be able to speak up, but to create allies within white teammates. We have to keep making that a normal thing and asking them to step out of their comfort zone and speaking out about it, because professional sports is a platform, regardless, and it's huge, and sometimes it's even bigger than politics. But just because we don't, emphasize our profession in politics and certain things like that doesn't make us, American citizens or whatever citizens we are for the citizens for our countries. We still have to live through those things every single day. So we have to not only create spaces like Elle said, but also create allies amongst each other within professional sports.
So Zach, building from that, what motivated you to stand up against anti-Semitism? And I first became aware of this when you posted the video about Deshaun Jackson.
Right.
So,
I just that was just more of a passionate defense because, like, once again, it's crazy that you asked that right after that in response. Like, we other than some of the Jewish players in our league, like Edelman, the Schwartz brothers, and all those guys, no one else was really speaking out about it. And, like, unfortunately for guys within the Players Association not speaking up about it, it not only hurts, like, we have to realize, like, our audience is massive, especially within the NFL. So when one of us messes up like that, we have to be able to, in a very professional manner, which I thought that was that video in my own social platform. We have to be able to not only say we're not a part of that, that's not what we believe in. And, Deshaun will find is that's why, we're not making it about Deshaun, but he's going through his educational processes through his mistake. But just the fact that we have to hold each other to the standard, we can't let those mistakes happen, because there was some little Jewish kid out there that was really, really hurt by that. And there were a lot of people who reached out who were even Eagles fans at the time that says, like, thank you for doing that. There were upper office guys, like owners of teams, general managers, executive office, holder, like, all those guys are just reaching out saying thank you. It shouldn't, I didn't want to make it about me, because it isn't, but we have to, like, once again, change that standard of not only not making that mistake again and creating hate amongst each other, but also at the same time, when it happens, we have to fix it, and we have to fix it permanently.
yeah, there's a deeper conversation also about where all those ideas came from in the first place, and then how you can educate so that you can say, it's just not true. Here's the roots of that. But I would be remiss, Zach, if I didn't say the other response you got after the video was, like, all of the people inviting you to Shabbat dinner and sending you challah. And
Breaking bread has been, historically, since the beginning of time. It's how we, end wars. It's how we end hate, in any culture in the world. That's how you do it. So I can't wait for COVID to be over.
I'm with you on that.
Challah bread.
I'm ready to, like, have a meal finally, sit in the same room. So yeah, Elle, so you've told us a lot about this already, but can you say more about what's motivating you to stand up against anti-Semitism?
Hey, I realized actually how little I knew or know about anti-Semitism, which seems ironic because I am Jewish, and my name, if someone sees my name, they immediately know I'm Jewish. But I've been in a lot of situations where I am trying to explain to people what it means to be Jewish, or I feel uncomfortable and I'm not sure why. And so for me, to learn about, the forms of anti-Semitism, and that it might not be so outward and blatant, and what could some more of the subtle signs of anti-Semitism be, I think is important. And I find myself in a world too where I mentioned, the league is great majority white players in the women's soccer league. Well, I actually don't know if there's currently a Jewish player in the league. And when I connected with Alicia before this, I was asking her the same thing about the WNBA, and there might be a couple, but I was always such a minority in my space, is that I do feel, I feel passionate about raising awareness. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that for people to understand, what does it mean to be Jewish, and to understand why something is wrong, why it's wrong to say something or to draw a certain connection. And I've found that I'm not even able to explain those things. So how would I expect somebody else, maybe who doesn't have a Jewish background, to do that? So for me, it's a lot of it is about educating myself and being able to speak about the issues. And I've found in many situations where I take note of a time when maybe something is said or done that I know isn't right, but I don't feel empowered or strong enough in my own understanding and values to speak up against it. And my goal, I guess, in fighting anti-Semitism on a personal level would be to know enough and have enough of an understanding where I could say, hey, wait, you know what you just said? That's actually anti-Semitic, and here's why. And for me, I think that is important personally. And then to be able to start those conversations with others in leadership roles is really important.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, about what that looks like when you go to people in leadership roles. But Alicia, I want to hear from you.
Yeah, and to piggyback again, I'm piggybacking a lot today, but to piggyback off of what Zach and Yael were saying, just about the raising awareness part, I do believe that a lot of the racism or racist remarks or anti-Semitic remarks aren't unintentional from a lot of our peers or people that we may know or are around, just because it's been so embedded in our culture for so long, just the imaging behind certain race groups or different religions. And it's just, whether consciously or subconsciously, these things are constantly being shown to us, have been said around us, and we don't even know that we're picking up on it. And, one of the biggest things that I've learned over this past year is just really understanding that everyone has biases. We all have grown up in a particular culture, in a particular area, around particular people. And in those cultures, you're taught certain things. And until you are exposed to other cultures, other religions, whatever it may be, you don't realize it because it's the norm in your circle. It's the norm around, who you're around. And so, I feel like there's been a lot of shame in people being like, well, I'm not this way. I don't believe that. And it's like, it's not that you're doing it intentionally, but you do. Like, we all have biases. When you go to a certain part of town, or when you go to a place, like, you act a certain way. When you're around certain people, you act a certain way. And it's just because of how you were brought up. And so I think where I've found the most interesting and the most relatable is just like, okay, learning how to understand these biases that we all have, and starting with myself, like, where are my biases? Where do those lie? And then unlearning those. And that for me has been the biggest lesson, is just helping people understand, like, you don't have to feel ashamed about it. Everybody has these, and it's just like we all have grown up in different ways, but it's unlearning the bad biases that we've had over the course of 30 plus years that you've been alive, whatever it is, and just teaching the truth about it. Like, I was saying, like, there's a lot of times where, when it's about a certain group and those people are constantly standing up, for us as female athletes, we're like, we need to be paid more. We need more exposure. We need these things. Like, we're producing the product. Now we need, like, the opportunity to be able to showcase this, to grow. And when you hear, it's like, when you're a child, your parents always like, don't do this, don't do this. And the child's like, okay. And then the aunt comes over and is like, hey, don't do that. And the kid stops doing it. It's just a different voice. So when like Zach was saying, when we can get allies, where our teammates, the people who aren't the ones that are fighting against these oppressions, against these, these things that are going on, when you have a different voice now coming into it and using the platform that is different. Yael's platform is completely different than the platform that Zach may have or that I may have, and vice versa. So when she now is speaking up about racism and all these things, people are like, oh, I've never really had somebody speak up about this or tell me about this. So I think through all of this, just really understanding the importance of allies, the importance of understanding, starting within yourself and understanding your biases and unlearning those, and then just having empathy, again, towards people that are different than you. How boring it's all over, but how boring would this world be if we were all the same? You know what I mean? So just celebrating our differences, celebrating all of that, and just really embracing it.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk more about how you all are using your platforms and also specific challenges that you're facing in your sports. So we've heard a little bit about the demographics of each sport, and it resonates for me because we're really active in schools, and schools are like that too. Schools with no diversity that have the same problems as schools with. So let's hear about that, how you're using your platforms and how this is reflected in your individual sports. We can go to Zach. I have an order going. I'll just stick to it.
Sorry, I was about to say, I just wanted to stick to the transitions. Definitely breaking out of my comfort zone with the different audiences and speaking out and being freely. For example, like, done a lot of inner city work back home in Tacoma, Washington. The same thing in Los Angeles, where I went to school, on the island of Guam, where my mother grew up. But breaking on, being bold enough to, we're talking about making Pittsburgh, obviously it's a home for me for football, but also making it a home in terms of community work. Because I do stuff with the Steelers organization all the time. But even when it comes down to work like that and doing work with those organizations, there's certain quote unquote professional barriers that they try to make sure we don't cross. One, to point out that that's BS, but two, to show that, to have, like, as my career keeps going up like this, so does the community work, and so does, creating empathy and building a team and building alliances. But I want to not feel uncomfortable anymore going into white suburban neighborhoods to reach out for allies. That can be very, very uncomfortable, and sometimes you don't really know how that happens. But when everything starts opening up and people get back to being around people, I think it's very important for myself and my team to not only speak to the schools in the inner city for inspiration, but to also to do the same thing. Hey, Zach Banner, the Steelers here to visit. Hey, kids, da 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 da. And to look at the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or how many ever little Black and brown kids and see the smiles on their faces because we're talking about those same topics. Does that make sense? And not being uncomfortable about that. And also working, and that can be, both of my parents are educators, but I know damn well if I went to go speak at their schools, if they taught within those schools, they love to emphasize with inner city kids. But if my mother was the principal of a school out there in North Wexford or Pine out here, which is a suburban area out here in Pittsburgh, I know she would welcome me with open arms to have a conversation like this in front of the kids. Of course, we need to understand that they're children, but at the same time, I mean, how I was in second grade reading a book about the bombing of the Birmingham church and the 4 little girls that got killed in that. I think we need to understand that, especially with our phones and the technology that these kids have, TikTok and things like that. They see everything. They see world news. How are we able to calm everything down and suppress it for them a little bit, but at the same time have meaningful conversations? Because as it's really hard to know that I'm in the same locker room with men in their 20s and 30s, if you count Ben, his 40s. But it's hard to believe that there are men and women in the NFL and within our organization who have not been introduced to certain topics and don't understand that the same passion that Elle had for her Black and brown teammates and just things like that. It's incredible that people are not being introduced to this until later parts in their life. And then it sucks because it's been so entrenched and it's such a solid belief system that they have. It's hard to knock down those barriers that they've been feeling and then they've lived by their entire lives. And sometimes it's not as hard, but it's very, very difficult. So if kids aren't born into this world with hate, they're taught it, right? And so with that being said, how do we unteach hate and how do we knock down those barriers before they're even built?
This is a perfect endorsement for the work that we do at the Holocaust Center in schools. And I mean, starting in kindergarten and up, and the kindergartners, like they don't see difference. So that I'm tempted to say, just stay like you are before you learn all of these other things that we're going to have to undo.
And before somebody else speaks, can I also identify something? Like, I didn't know what anti-Semitic meant until the article that was typed up and tweeted out. It wasn't typed up by Schefter, but he tweeted it out. And that was that morning that I read that, getting ready to go do cardio and stuff, and said, Deshaun Jackson's anti-Semitic comments, he's in trouble. I had to Google what anti-Semitic meant, you know what I mean? And what anti-Semitism is. And that's very, very important. It really is.
It is. And the last thing I want to pick up on that you said is that for kids of all ages, they are living in this world. So if we're reluctant to acknowledge what they're seeing and give them a chance to talk about it, we've got a problem. We need to be willing to do that. So, okay, I want to go to Alicia about how you're using your platform, please.
Yeah, so for me, I'm the type of person that before I speak on anything, I always want to be as informed and as educated as possible. It's just how I've always been, even before, being a professional athlete. It's whether it was in class and we're talking, going over a study of something, and it's like I wanted to know everything about it, so that way when I'm talking, I could, be able to give all the different possibilities and answers there are. So I think for me right now, my platform is one of just, again, it's just of awareness, and it's of awareness in a positive light. Because I think right now, we are so overwhelmed with the amount of information, the amount of things that are coming out on the news, the amount of things that we see. And I think if you just continue with that same delivery, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And so, I'm very intentional about the things that I want to speak about and focus on, just so it doesn't get lost in the masses. And for me, the way that, the one thing that I feel like is one of my strengths is I'm able to bring people together, whether it's being the leader for my basketball team, whether it's being a leader in the community. That's something that I pride myself on being able to do. It's something that, is very intuitive, but, just helping people be aware, and in a positive light, because at the end of the day, when you are approaching a situation with kindness, with love, with empathy, people are more like apt to want to listen, versus like shaming someone or making them feel badly about not knowing about something. It's like, no, it's okay. We all have deficiencies in all areas, but it's like, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you be better. So that way, when you're sitting around with your friends over coffee, or at dinner, or sitting around family members, you can start to recognize these microaggressions on different levels, and having the confidence to be like, hey, actually, that's not okay to say anymore. And I think for so long, all of these different subtleties in communication have just been passed over. It's like, you hear a teammate or a friend say something, and it's like, you're just kind of like, that's not okay, but I'm not going to speak up and say anything. And now it's like, hey, no, actually, that's not cool to say. Maybe find another way to express what you're trying to say. And, in that split second, that's a moment for them to self-recognize and be like, whoa, okay, well, let me try. They might get defensive, but then you never know that it's going to help change the course of their thoughts. So for me, it's just starting, in that small community of people I'm around daily, on my interactions on my social media platforms, just starting small and hoping that planting these small seeds of light, of positivity and education will then grow. And hopefully, years later, we'll see some change, because through all of this, as we know, change doesn't happen overnight. It's going to be one battle after the next. And that's something that, as we're going through this, just understanding, like, I may not get to see the change, but as long as I'm planting the seeds along the way, eventually it's going to start to bloom. And then there's going to be bigger change down the line for hopefully my kids and after that.
Yeah, Elle, I want to come to you.
Yeah, wow, there's a lot of, I'm really inspired listening to both of you guys. And what I would say for myself, my biggest challenge in this, I think, is to make sure that me personally and the larger women's soccer world in particular, it doesn't stay immune from or blinded to things going on all the time that maybe doesn't have to affect our individual lives. And it's not true for the entire women's soccer league, but the truth of the matter is, in the athletic world and a lot of the demographic of the league, it would be possible for a lot of us to, see some stuff on Twitter, close our phone and go on with our day. And for me, my constant challenge is to not have that be the case, and to make sure that the wonderful work that advocates are doing, and the people who have dedicated their lives towards education and reform and social justice, that we are listening and we're very tuned in to everything going on, because there's such amazing work being done. It would be a real shame, and I feel this way sometimes, even on a day when I'm busy and I haven't paid attention to something that is life or death for someone else. For me, I realize every day how much of a privilege that is, but to kind of break down the barriers of that privilege, I think. And it's true for professional athletes in a lot of senses, regardless of the background that someone comes from. Quite often, it's a great privilege to be able to play a sport and every day, and that's your bread and butter, and you get to go and worry about competing and winning and playing time and things like that. And like the reality is, outside of that world, some people are more aware of, other challenges or not. And so for me to have these conversations within the league and make sure that we are staying aware. And I think awareness really is a word that I come back to all the time. Staying aware of what's going on and what's affecting other people, even if it doesn't directly affect us, I think is huge. And only from there can you ever, there's no answer. There's no one direct course of action. But for me, if we're not aware of it, we can't even begin to have a conversation surrounding how to make it better.
You all are really just so inspirational. So thank you so much. I'm going to do one more question because the time is flying as it does. So I wanted to share first just a fun fact, which is that Zach Banner single-handedly brought me back to watching NFL football. Of a little known fact. I really stopped watching after Colin Kaepernick took a knee to protest police violence and everything that happened after that. That I really stopped watching football, but as I see what's happened in the NFL and positive change coming, I said, got to watch it. So Zach, thank you. And the Steelers should thank you. I know you brought a lot of people back who had really had it with what was going on with sort of blindness to what Colin Kaepernick was really saying. And it's particularly timely now for us to think about that again on the heels of the conviction of Derek Chauvin for murder of George Floyd. So I want to connect these two things because they are connected. And as we have a growing awareness of a real problem that is hundreds of years in the making in our society, and we recognize that anti-Semitism is not the same thing, but it is connected. I just want to give each of you a chance to reflect on what's happening in our country this week with the convictions that we just learned about, how significant that is, and where you see things going in this struggle against racism in this country.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Doc. I appreciate the support. It's incredibly unfortunate and also disappointing when people don't understand, why Colin knelt, why we kneel, why other sports kneel now. I watched the interview, or not an interview, or whatever you want to call it, between Trevor Noah and Tommy Lauren, or however you pronounce her name, from a couple years ago. I know I roll too, Alicia, every time I speak. But he kept asking, if you disagree with the kneeling, as peaceful of a protest as it is, a man or woman going over there in the corner and taking a knee during national anthem. And she's talking about it's disrespectful to patriotism and to the patriots and to the people who fight. And if you've heard veterans and active military personnel saying they're not offended by it, then what would you do instead? And her response was, no, well, it's not American and and it's disrespectful. No. You didn't hear the question. You didn't answer the question. What would you do instead? I think after going through that very, very, very deep and emotional day yesterday during the trial, and as a nation, holding our breath about a decision, I think, and to awkwardly celebrate a man going to jail for a very long time. Afterwards, you have to step back and say, how do we prevent somebody from like George Floyd getting killed again? How do we prevent having to go through this emotion? Why is it so suspenseful, the decision? Why is it's versus what, once again, it's not who's right and who's left. It's about what is right and what is wrong. There are very, very deep things within our education system, our judicial system, and a lot of other things around our country and our world that keep things like this happening. When we meet up like this and we speak out and we protest and we get people together, right? his question to her was, you disagree with rioting and looting and stuff like that. I am very, very deeply emotional about when I see a small business getting looted. I really am. But at the same time, I'm not going to speak out, and I'm going to ask them to stop the violence, but I'm not going to ask them to stop a movement. And just because one person who's part of a crowd, right? People try to shoot down BLM and things like that. Black Lives Matter does not consist of a person running in a building screaming BLM and looting a place. That's not why it started. That's not why it's still going, and that's not why Black and brown people are begging for empathy. We have to create spaces, like Elle said, safe spaces to have conversation about fixing things. And we have to do it in a very aggressive way and getting into good trouble. That's what we've heard for a very, very long time. And we have to identify those ways that are both safe and constructive, but also tear down a system that's killing Black and browns, that's allowing a synagogue to be shot up, that's allowing all these certain things. So we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. We have to get into good trouble, but we also need to have a mission every time we do, because we need to understand that there's young and confused people, and there's old and confused people who are really uneducated when they step out of their homes, and they think that they're doing something for a good cause, but in reality it's hurting, and it's giving those others on the other side an excuse not to support something. And I'm tired of that, to be honest with you. Sorry for taking so long.
Alicia.
Yeah, so much to what Zach was saying, just about this conflicting feeling that you have. Yesterday was very emotionally draining and exhausting. The fact that for so many of us, Black and brown people in this country, literally sitting on the edge of our couches, nervous about a decision that was clear as day, that we were nervous about the right thing being done. And this is the constant battle that we face in this country because of the deep-rooted white supremacy in this nation. And I think we're in a place, in a time where it's starting to be uprooted. It took for a 17-year-old girl to record this tragedy happening for it to even be considered and put on trial to be considered wrong because of this false, not even false, but like this very vague and false police report that was filed. But that is the reality that we've been facing, that our parents and our grandparents have been facing for decades, for hundreds of years. And I think what's starting to happen is now non-Black and brown people in our country are getting a very little taste of the struggles that we face on an everyday basis through education, through healthcare, through the justice system. And it's starting to now, it's not that it wasn't there before, but now it's starting to be brought to light. And even still being brought to light, there's still questions like, well, this, well, that. And it's been very evident that you're either on the right side or you're on the wrong side of humanity. It has nothing to do with the politics you believe in. It has nothing to do with business taxes or cuts or any of that. It has to do with the mere fact of humanity and the fact that we have to sit here day in and day out and fight to be looked at as humans. Not even, that's what hurts the most, is because how do I look my nieces and nephews in the eye and help them understand this? Because as Black and brown people in this country, we don't get the privilege of being able to not speak about about race or about the inequalities. Like, we don't get that. At 3 years old, 4 years old, our children, our nieces, our nephews are being taught that you're going to be disliked because of your skin color, because of this. And it falls the same, where you say anti-Semitism is connected. It's the same thing. You're teaching your Jewish, you're not going to be liked because you're Jewish, because of what you believe. Like, there's a lot of people that don't, like, we don't get that privilege. And there's a lot of people that do. They can just post about the wine tasting that they just went to yesterday, when the rest of us are sitting here like, like, but that's the reality. I don't have that privilege not to say something or speak up about these types of things. So I think, it's as tragic as it is, and as George Floyd's death was, this is just a small taste of what we have to go through on an everyday basis that everyone is now getting to see and feel. And my hope, I'm clinging on to the little bit of hope, but my hope is that from the verdict yesterday, that this starts to, have change happen, that, police officers are being held accountable for their actions, that these laws and protections that have been in place for so long are now being looked at, and hopefully, are going to be removed and be changed, because this is such a pivotal moment right now in our history that 10 years from now, we're going to have to be telling our kids, like, this really happened. Like, it's not, I know it probably seems fake and like out of this world, you couldn't imagine it, but no, we really lived that. So I'm hoping in that time frame, this sparks that change that can really start to make major movement.
And you all have such an important role. You've taken this on to keep that momentum building and going. So Yael, this gets us back to the point of beginning and what you said in your earliest remarks in this conversation about the realization of how the experience is different. And for fair-skinned Jews like me, it's an important realization, because we do experience the world as Jewish people, but it's a very different kind of experience. So Yael, I'm eager to hear from you, and then I'm afraid we need to wind things down. So.
Yeah, and what I will add to this is going to be fairly short, because it's really hard to follow what you guys just said and have, quite honestly, much to add from my perspective, and that's how I feel. And I'm really moved by hearing from you both, and I think it kind of concludes my thinking in the sense of, for me, the way forward here has to do with education, but not education like reading in a book, education in terms of like humanizing these broader issues that we talk about. And what that means for me has been on a personal level through my family, is seeing the pain that my husband goes through and the fear that he has, thinking about his parents and some of the things that they dealt with coming up in the world and still do today. It's hearing you guys talk about something that I can see happen in the world, but I will never be able to feel what you guys felt yesterday, or unfortunately every day of your lives. And I think it's the same thing when we talk about anti-Semitism. It's, Zach, you thinking about, what is a teammate of your, maybe a Jewish teammate or somebody, like, what are they actually going through? This is a human being. And so we can hear about racism, anti-Semitism. An example I always use is, sometimes it takes some men having a daughter to say, like, oh, now I believe in feminism because I have a daughter. Well, it shouldn't take that, but that's the reality of, that's how it happens in the world, is you have to know somebody and stand with them in their pain to actually, I think, feel strongly enough to truly be an ally. And so in every one person that experiences that with somebody who's feeling their pain, whatever it's from, I think, you add to it one person at a time. And like Alicia mentioned, you're either on the right side or the wrong side. There are people who will never come to that point in their lives, but if every day one person can be added to get it in some way or another, even if it's the smallest little thing, it's powerful and it grows momentum. So I think that's the only way it can be done. It has to be a humanization of something that is conceptual otherwise.
And that was so well put. And I just, in conclusion, I want to echo what Yael said about how meaningful it was to hear from both Zach and Alicia about your responses to what happened yesterday. And this is how we get there. This is how we bridge these divides, which shouldn't even be divides, but yet we're living with them all the time, is by listening to each other and having respect for that experience and recognizing that, like, we care about you, we care about this, and we don't have all the answers, right? So I'm so grateful to all of you for being here and being honest and brave and so generous in sharing your thoughts and your experiences, and for everything that you do to bring so many people into this movement to counter racism, to counter anti-Semitism. And we're going to get there when we work together. So just thank you so much.
Our conference is off to a tremendous start. We have listened, learned, honed best practices, and networked together. Thank you to everyone for your participation. We look forward to seeing you tonight for the movie Shared Legacies, followed by a talkback discussion with our esteemed panelists. For those watching the movie, it will start promptly at 7 p.m. Eastern. For those who have viewed it previously, please join us for the talkback at 8:30 p.m. The conference will continue tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, when we will present the JCPA Chernin Award to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.